A friend of mine, Bill McDermott, hosted a CEO summit that my wife and I attended in New York City recently. Bill runs SAP, the largest business enterprise software in the world, and as of now, I think it's about $144 billion a year and continuing to grow. His clients are the CEOs of almost every major corporation in the world, and this is his annual meetup. Well, for this prominent crowd, he had none other than the 42nd and 43rd President of the United States, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush there. During the vibrant conversation that Bill facilitated with the two presidents, the question of how they approached difficult leadership decisions came up. Just think about the world-changing decisions both men were faced with through their 16 years captaining the most powerful and watched nation in the world during their reign. Clinton, through two shutdowns of the federal government, American interventions in Somalia, Haiti, and the Balkans, the Branch Davidians, Timothy McVeigh, Columbine High School, and everything else. Of course, Bush through 9/11, Afghanistan, the Iraq War, the No Child Left Behind Act, and Hurricane Katrina, and everything else as well. Think what you want about these men and their politics. These are some incredible circumstances to have to navigate with the world's peace and prosperity hanging in the balance. I particularly liked Clinton's answer to the question. Here is what he said, and the lesson that I want to pass forward to you this morning. He said, if you have to make what you know is going to be an unpopular decision, make it quick. Because the longer that you think about it, the more likely you will lose your courage to do the right thing versus the popular thing. He recounted his decision to authorize the U.S. Treasury Department to make an emergency loan of up to $20 billion to Mexico to forestall a financial crisis threatening the interconnected Mexican and American economies. This was after an earlier rejection by the Republican-led Congress of the loan. Political foes like Pat Buchanan were searing him in the press, calling it an abuse of power and daylight robbery of the nation's wealth. The American taxpayers' money will never see again, he said. Polls even show that 88% of the population did not favor making the loan, and Clinton's popularity was on dramatic decline as a result. Even his own allies, the internal counsel, were explaining that this decision would end his ability to ever get reelected, that if he proceeded, he'd essentially be putting the knife in the hand of Brutus. Clinton argued that the peso's continued fall would endanger Mexico's economy and negatively affect that of the United States, that an insolvent Mexico would hand over the reign of the country to the drug cartels and spur an influx of illegal immigration, threatening U.S. jobs and undermining border security, and that U.S. exports to Mexico would dwindle, hampering our own economy without the loan. He knew what the right thing to do was for our neighbors, for the people of Mexico, and for our own long-term interest, even if it meant he was falling on his own sword. As he said, if he lingered too long in making the decision, he would surely submit to the weight of popular opinion, to the threats of the naysayers and the imposter syndrome in his own head. Most of us probably would. This is why this is such wise counsel. When you have to make a big or an unpopular or a counter status quo decision, make it quick. Don't let it linger, or you are sure to be overcome by the influence of sameness, of what's easier, what's safer, and what everybody else thinks. The psychology at play here is what Dr. Timothy Wilson of Harvard University called the wet blanket syndrome. He says, quote, the brain considers change very dangerous. Change is seen as a threat. Thus, the brain creates emotional resistance. If the mind can kill a great idea by dampening it with emotional turmoil, it will, end quote. That's exactly what happens to you when you belabor an important decision. The longer you take to decide, the more time the brain has to strangle your strength, your knowledge of what's the right thing to do, but the unpopular and unsafe one. By the way, Mexico did repay the loan, and 3 years early, in fact, with a $500 million extra bonus in loan interest. So a great decision after all. And certainly it didn't cost him re-election either, after all, as we know. Now, you tell us, what has been some of the toughest decisions that you've had to make in your leadership or life? When did you go against the advice of friends and family and what they were telling you? And how did it work out? I look forward to learning from your lessons in the comments below. We are facing a global crisis.
No, not climate change, poverty, or politics. Those continue to exist because of this crisis. Lack of leadership. Leaders of character, courage, emotional intelligence, and integrity. The world needs you to step up, to lead, to light the path forward for others. This is your call to adventure.